for well over 30 years in various capacities, various places. And he also has been a lecturer for my class that I teach at Purdue on developing underground space for the last 3 years, and I'm going to also have him sign up for this next semester. So he's been a very important part of the things that we do at Purdue and other places. So Steve, appreciate you being here.
I'll take the mic in a second, but you've been sitting way too long, and you know I have a sore throat. I'm going to ask you to stand a little bit, stand up, because sitting this long is unhealthy for you. So I'm asking you to do some stretches or some squats, whatever you want to do. I'll do squats. You can do 5 with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or if you want to do stretches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did a big milestone this year. I have a competitive triathlete son, and my son challenged me, excuse me, in January to do a triathlon with him, and he said, well, I could still do it. Okay? And I did it. I trained for 4 months hard. And those of you that are swimmers, bikers, or runners, I'm a regular biker and runner, and a pretty poor swimmer. And I dived into it was an open water swim in cold water in Chesapeake Bay. And I dove in that water, and I was all motivated and excited after my 4 months of training. And I started swimming like this, and like this, and like this. I zigzagged my way across the harbor and swam 20% further than I should have to finish the race. And at the halfway point, I got so tired of doing the crawl, I went into a breaststroke. And I was so happy to get on that bike. I never was so excited to be bike ride. But I did finish. Excuse me. The sad part of it, I'm over 60 years old. And there were 30 people, over 400 athletes in the race. 30 of us were over 60. And you think, I should be able to do okay in my age group, right? Well, I was third to last in my age group. The person who came in first in my age group was top 20 overall. Kind of insane. So, but it was a bucket list moment for me that I was very excited about. So it's hard to wrap up the day, but hopefully I'll engage with you, or you'll engage with me as we do these slides. I think about what we've been talking about. We've had a heavy focus on technical items. And George talked a little bit about institutional items or political items. I'm going to talk about the commercial side of the business. I think of this as a 3-legged stool. You have to do all 3, or you don't really have a project. If we do the technical stuff right, very often the political parts can be our downfall. And you heard George talk about the mayor taking credit for everything DC Water was doing. That can be good or bad, but we also have to look at how we get the work done. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how do we deliver the work, the commercial side of the business, and what we do. So here's a little bit what I'll talk about. We're going to talk about trends. We're going to talk about all the types of delivery methods, especially the ones that have become very popular right now. And what's interesting, the buzzwords of today, which are very interesting, like progressive design build. I did my first progressive design build job 23 years ago. I wasn't smart enough to call it progressive design build. I called it modified design build, which some of my colleagues laugh at when people are talking about progressive design build. What the hell are they talking about? So we're going to talk about how projects are being delivered. I'm going to focus on tunnel projects and trenchless projects, because that's mostly what I do. But these methodologies can apply to anything. And it's really become a long list of methods, and often confusing. There's not a magic wand out there in the way to deliver projects. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. So what's the great method of today might not be the great method of tomorrow. I'll give you some of the lessons learned for somebody who has seen the good side of it, the bad side of it, the ugly side of it, and some jobs that I'd like to forget. What's interesting, I share with some of the people that work for me, I say, I only remember my successful jobs. The bad ones I just forget about. They go away. So just a little bit about the industry, and in particular the tunnel and the trenchless industry. When I look at this industry, and it applies to both tunneling, and a lot of you do tunnel projects, you do inspection projects, it is all of these. It's a small community. And traditionally, these contractors, especially as the projects get bigger, they are very savvy. They understand the risk of taking this work on, and as some of my friends like to say, contractors don't take on risk, they price risk. So the owners in the room, if you think you're shifting risk, yeah, you might be shifting risk, but you're paying for it. And sometimes that isn't a good approach. You may be overpaying for that risk by a lot. And what's interesting is the contracting community, one week they're competing against each other, and the next week they're the best of partners. It's kind of a funny industry, right? Apple and Google, yeah, I guess they've kind of become partners now, but they hated each other for a long time. But that's unusual about our industry. The bidding atmosphere in our country has changed. A decade ago, the international players were just little players in our business. Now these players are everywhere, and they're taking a larger share of the market. There is a clear movement away from traditional delivery to alternative delivery, really for all types of projects. And Anna talked about some of the work at DC Water, even some of the smaller jobs, how they're going to alternative delivery today. What this does is it changes the relationship that engineers have with owners, because the engineers are now working for the contractors. Some people like working for contractors, other people don't. I say I like to work for them. I'd say, is anyone a contractor in the room? Okay, so I can pick on you a little bit. I like working you for most days, but some days you're pretty hard. The contracting community believes that contract documents need to be tailored to industry standards. And what do I mean by industry standards? Particularly for underground work, that means using things like differing site conditions, geotechnical baseline reports, dispute review boards. These are not cheap things to incorporate in your jobs. But if you don't do it, often you're not going to have successful projects. So it's interesting when you look at general construction, and often I mean general construction, it could be a roadway, could even be a bridge, could be a building. But when you compare it to underground projects, it's a different game. Our work, since we're really talking about buried assets, tends to be linear work. And what do I mean by that? If we hit an obstacle, I can't go to the other side of the tunnel. I have to solve my obstacle. And that's true if we're doing inspection work, if we're doing pipeline work. When you have a building going up, you just send the people to another part of the building. On a highway, you send them down the road a bit. Even on a bridge, because I do bridges as well, we can send them to another part of the bridge. That doesn't happen in underground work. That makes it much more complex. So this was a survey I did a few years back, and I asked owners, what are your needs? And they came up with this list. Who are the owners in the room? Raise your hand. Okay, John, I'm going to pick on you because I know you'll tell me. Do you agree with this list? Or what's missing from this list? What do you like? Safety. Yes, safety is important. Competitive bidding. Who else is an owner? Who wants to admit they're an owner? Thank you, from Chicago. Do you agree with that? Yeah, we want to do that, but it's hard to do, right? It's nice to say that, though, but often it feels like we're at odds. So think about this as we go through the presentation. So I drew this little chart up, and it's a continuum. Now, who has never done a conventional delivery project in the room? Anybody? No. Anybody else? Conventional delivery, I mean design, bid, build. What's interesting is when I asked some of our younger engineers today, have they ever done anything but alternative delivery? That's all they know. Because of this shift, and I'll show you some statistics on what's happened in the industry. So we went all the way from the first 15 years of my career. That's what I did. Design, bid, build. And then I got to do my first alternative delivery job, a design build job. And I literally thought I had the magic wand. Now, my projects would all be successful. I wouldn't have overruns. I wouldn't have claims. We wouldn't have change orders. All that stuff is going to go away. Well, it happened for a little while, and then there came a shift where the finger pointing changed. So what seemed like a good solution, I'm going to show you some important numbers in a moment, you'll see suddenly alternative delivery doesn't sound so good anymore. Okay, and we're going to go through these, so if you're not familiar with them, we'll get you to be an expert in every type of alternative delivery by the time we're done. So design, bid, build, more of a linear process where the designers design the job 100%, and then they put it out to bid. The owner puts it out to bid, selects a contractor, usually on low price. We have CM at risk, which a lot of different ways that CM at risk, meaning construction management at risk. A constructor is selected based on qualifications shortly after the design of selection. Then what usually happens is there's a pre-construction level that the design gets to maybe 50, 60, sometimes 100% before that contractor then submits a final price, a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price. The advantage of that is they're then bidding on 100% design jobs. So there should be more confidence in their price. I'm going to skip progressive design build and come back to it. Design build left sum, traditionally what happens in that, an owner's engineers develops a design, a preliminary design, maybe at 30%. They put it out to bid. Design build team bids on the work. Maybe there's a tender period where they get to develop that design further. Maybe the owner pays for some of that tender design with a success fee on that, and then they bid that job. Now, progressive design build came about recently. Everybody thinks it's the great way to do things right now. Here, you're going to choose a design build team based upon qualifications. And then they're going to develop the design together, and then the owner allows them to submit their price, and the owner can decide whether they accept that price or put it out to rebid. So I won't say the name of the job, but I was not the winning team on this one. And the owner estimated the job was going to be about $3 billion. Okay? Big job. They selected the progressive design build team. And want to guess the price? If you know the job? 5. Do I hear higher? 10. $15 billion. Okay? Now, is that the right price? I don't know. I do know what my team estimated that at. It wasn't $15 billion. So, was this an optimal way to do it? I'm not sure. And then there's versions of design, build, operate, and I'm going to show you that, where there's a concession or public-private partnerships that have been used a little bit in the U.S., been used more in other parts of the country. So this is fun to look at. This would be what the Design Build Institute of America would say: by using alternative delivery, we save time, and therefore we save money. Sometimes 10%, 30% of the time to do the job. Well, how does that happen? Typically, by not having to do 100% design before completing the job, you can start early on specific items that need to get built. So therefore, you're running design and construction in parallel, and that saves time. Does it always happen? No. Sometimes, yes. So here's the interesting part of the story. If you remember one thing from today, remember this. So Travelers Insurance, one of the largest bonding companies in the U.S., looked back, a 16-year study of work that they had insured, 224 projects with construction costs from $250 million to $4 billion. More than 4 out of the 10 projects, the design-build contractor did not cover their cost. That meant they lost money. Okay? In particular, big design-build projects were money losers. And according to this study, contractors did better with conventional delivery. Now, this isn't just underground work. This is all types of work. But I could rattle off underground work where this was true. So this caused a pretty big shift in how people wanted to look at things. And the contracting community said, uh-oh. But more importantly, Travelers said, we may not bond you if you take on these certain types of jobs because we think the risks are too high. A little scary, right? With all the money that's coming out, I say it is a fantastic time to be an underground or tunnel engineer. I could hire probably 25 more engineers and put them to work today if I could find them. And this goes for a lot of our profession right now. Because of all the money pouring into infrastructure, we don't have enough people. So this is a fun diagram to look at. This looks at some of the projects that have happened probably for the last 10 to 15 years across the U.S. And what you see there is all types of delivery methods are being used. And that's interesting. So even though there was this shift to alternative delivery, conventional delivery in some geographies and for some types of work is still very popular. And even today, some big projects are still coming out with conventional delivery, and it ties back to the study I just showed you. So just to give you a little taste of some of the projects that have occurred out there. These were done with conventional delivery. And these are some mid-sized projects and some very big ones. In particular, conventional delivery is still popular at some of the major water and wastewater authorities, as you see here with Northeast Ohio, Indianapolis with a deep rock sewer, and then you see, for a while, New York did not want to do alternative delivery. Second Avenue subway, anybody take a ride on Second Avenue subway yet in New York? This was the subway that was planned for 100 years, and a segment has finally got built. It is the most expensive tunneling project in the world on a per-foot basis. Millions of dollars per foot. We could go out there with spoons, I like to say, and maybe do it as well. My friends would be upset with me for making that statement. But the cost of that project is astronomical. To do 2 miles of tunneling was $4.5 billion. $2.25 billion per mile. Expensive, right? So why do owners continue to use design, bid, build? They like to influence the design. They like to understand their cost before going to bid. They want to transfer risk. Contractually, they just understand it better. Sometimes they want to specify technology. So this is a way to do that. So the flip side of the coin, why do we go alternative delivery? And those are all the other methods that I showed. Single entity responsible for design, construction, technology, and project delivery. So I only have one. If I'm an owner, I only have one person to yell at. I can't yell at the designer separately from the contractor. I just yell at the contractor. Why are you late? If we do it right, it should cost less money, should be more efficient to administer, and maybe we get rid of some of that adversarial nature between the players when it goes well. So this is a nice quote from a senior manager at a big authority. They have stopped basically doing conventional delivery. They now use design build for all their projects. That's what they do. It's a big change. So here's a fun slide that I referenced earlier. This is from the Design Build Institute of America, and FMI does this data, and you see from 2013 to 2017, design build was 42%, design bid build was 36%, and CMGC, CMAR was 22%. Then from 2018 to 21, design build went to a slight increase, but design build, bid build went from 36% to 19%, in half, for all types of heavy construction. So that shows you the shift. It's real. Just showing a little bit of the structure here that I talked about before and how the owner interacts with the players. And you can see some advantage just in the efficiency, if you're an owner, why you might be attracted to use alternative delivery. Now, what's interesting on a design, build, operate, finance model or some type of P3, the owner actually is dealing with a concessionaire. They are one step removed from the contractor and the engineer, because those people report to the concessionaire. It's different when you think about it. So a little bit of how it works. So typically with traditional delivery, we'll do a qualification, a short list. There'll be a design that gets done, come up with a solution, get it to 100%, then you bid the design. Okay? Then for alternative delivery, very different process. Here we'll go through a qualification process, and I just completed a major design build project from the time our team formed, and we're about to be awarded, cross my fingers, it's 2 years. So did that save time? Very long tender process that went on here. We were shortlisted, and then we got an RFP. Then we went through a 9-month tender process. We had ATCs, or alternative technical concepts, TAs, or technical alternatives. We had 15 technical alternatives we developed. 8 got used. Then on top of that, our price went in, and then we had an interview for 4 hours, and then we had days of negotiation. It's interesting how the process works. So I'll give you some real examples. So this is a CMAR project, construction management at risk. A lot of lingo here. This is a little bit of a tour around the U.S. This is in Atlanta. This was an existing reservoir that wasn't being used. And Atlanta needed to have a backup to their water supply. So they decided to use this reservoir to store the water, and they needed a tunnel to connect to the reservoir. This is called the Chattahoochee Tunnel. And this went out as a CMAR where they had a designer on the owner's side, developed the design in parallel with a contractor that was selected. Then they converted it to a GMP, and this project got successfully constructed. What was nice is this is a reuse project because eventually they covered that quarry and created a beautiful park above that landmass. I'm going to stay in Atlanta because this was a recent progressive design build. Who has flown to Atlanta? A lot of people. Popular airport. So you ride what's called the plane train. And the plane train takes you between terminals and to baggage claim. But there was an issue. There was some congestion happening at that endpoint. So they needed to expand that tunnel to deal with those trains. And what you see in this orange line there, it had to go beneath what is the Sky Train that goes to some hotels and to the rental car agency, and they had to go beneath the MARTA system, the subway system. So short tunnel, very complex. Good reason to use progressive design build. People really weren't sure how to do this. Highly complex job, even though it was a short tunnel. And as I show here, it was only a 700-foot extension. So they selected a progressive design build team that worked with the owner to come up with a plan, and they converted it to a GMP. That got selected to do it. This was also a highly secured area that made this more complex. Now we'll get bigger, and I don't think George is still here. I'm going to do a little case history on DC Water because they've done so much tunneling. And so we'll get into that in a moment. But these were design-build lump sums. And the parallel Thimble Shoal Tunnel is in the Virginia Beach area. And this was called the sixth wonder of the world. One of my former firms, Sverdrup, was originally the designer of this. Those that remember that name eventually got bought by Jacobs. This has an immersed tube tunnel, then a bridge, and then another immersed tube tunnel to go across the Chesapeake Bay. They needed to build some redundancy in the entranceway on the Virginia Beach side. So they wanted to do what was called a parallel tunnel. And they had some great expectations of what they wanted to do. So I got to bid this job twice and came in second twice. So it was painful twice to do. But this set a parallel tunnel, and they let the contractors select whether they want to do immersed tube tunneling, which is a sunken tube, or a bored tunnel. Eventually, everybody selected to do a bored tunnel. What was interesting, though, is the immersed tube tunnel was a cheaper way to do it, but the environmental approvals were so onerous, we never thought we could get it approved quickly. So it was interesting. So you heard a little bit about DC Clean Rivers, and now this has gone on for a decade. This is a big program, $2.6 billion, 5 tunnels, a lot of supporting works on a consent decree. And there's lots of stories about what went on here, but I'm just going to tell you part of the story of why they selected to go design build. So they looked at all the methods that they could do for this. They looked at ECI, construction management risk, cost reimbursable, and then they came up with a plan. They were going to do all the tunneling, design build, and all the surface works with conventional delivery. Okay, so that was their plan. And here shows you pretty extensive program. And this goes throughout the D.C. area. You see the U.S. Capitol there. It's going near the old Commander's Stadium. You heard about the advanced wastewater treatment plant. And now the last tunnel is going to be built. Will go across the Potomac and go to Georgetown. So in the heart of D.C. So you can see what happened here. 5 big tunnels, 3 are complete, One is almost done, and one's about to be awarded. All being done with design build, with quite an array of contractors across the country to do this work. It's a fairly prescriptive design build that's being used. So P3s, it's a contractual arrangement between the agency and the private sector, usually for a shared facility, but I'll give an example where in FDOT, in Florida Department of Transportation, they used an advanced payment system to get done what they wanted. Often, this involves financing, ownership, and operation of that facility, frequently used in toll roads. The first one was the Dulles Greenway outside of Washington, D.C., done now over 25 years ago. Indiana Toll Road was another, not too far from here, and there's been a mixed bag of success with P3s. For a while, the Canadians loved P3s. Now they've kind of soured on them. So some recent P3s, one example was the Midtown Tunnel in Virginia again. This was done by a team of Skanska, Kiewit, and Weeks. They are now operating this tunnel. It was a 58-year public-private partnership, about $2 billion, and this was the last immersed tube tunnel that was constructed in the U.S. There is an immersed tube tunnel being considered right now for the Fraser River in Vancouver, BC. Another example, I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail to give you a flavor for it. This was the Port of Miami tunnel that I had the pleasure of being part of. This was a very complex geology that was difficult to go through. So for years, as cars and trucks came to Miami that have to go through downtown Miami to get to the port, causing congestion and chaos in the heart of Miami. So people were talking about, well, can't we put a tunnel in to connect Miami to the Port of Miami? And this is, you come down Interstate 95, it kind of just ended in Miami, but didn't get you to the port. So this is all the truck traffic going in both directions, all the people that want to take cruises, and just horrible congestion in Miami. A lot of people thought the geology here was inappropriate for tunneling. So a lot of evaluation was done. This went on for a long time. And they did what was called an availability payment here. FDOT did not have the money to pay for this tunnel. So what they said is, you bid the job and we'll pay you out over many years. So instead of having a concession, this is called an availability payment. And Bouygues, who's now called CB&A in the U.S., was the winning contractor with Jacobs as their designer. In the midst of this getting awarded, what happened in 2008? Who remembers? The financial markets collapsed. There was no way to get this project funded. Fortunately, some people came together, Meridian came in, and others came in and figured out how to get this done. So this went to close. Long construction period, but now this is fully operating. Now the interesting element of the contract, this is a little bit fun, at least for me. They established what was called a risk ladder, which I don't see used that often. But what they said was, Bouygues was responsible for the first $10 million of overruns to unexpected geological conditions. But FDOT took responsibility for the next $150 million. And then Bouygues took responsible for the next final $20 million. And if all that money got used up, either party could terminate and walk away from this contract with no harm. The reason this is clever is now everybody understands the risk. You can price accordingly, and you don't overprice the job. I would contend this methodology can be used on lots of projects we do. And owners could take a look at this, better how to manage risk. so they don't overprice their jobs or get bids way overpriced on their jobs. You identify the highest area of risk, and you set up some risk ladder to do it. It could be done on a much smaller job. It doesn't have to be a billion-dollar job. What worries you about this job? So there's lots of strategies that you can use to increase competitiveness. You can use progressive design build, modified fixed fee, fee at risk approaches. So I worked at the Pentagon twice, once post 9/11, where 100% of our profit was put at risk. Interesting. My boss said at that time, you're not going to make any money, because the Pentagon got to evaluate us and determine for a set criteria whether we would get awarded our profit. Well, we made our full profit. Also, there was a shared savings model, and we got more money. So there's ways to do things that help you manage your risk. So I list some of the others here. So some of the insights and learn from owners: using alternative technical concepts, keeping ideas confidential, doing private meetings with the contractors, having a reasonable stipend, understanding what your selection criteria is, and try not to overscope so you get innovation. From the other side, designers and contractors like best value. What's interesting, I'm part of a job right now, a design bid build job, that's using a best value approach, which is highly unusual. They're going to use 60% price and 40% qualifications to determine who they want. It's a very complex job. It's not too common that you see that. Remembering that lowest initial cost doesn't always provide the best solution. Risk sharing versus risk shifting. If you just shift your risk, you pay for it. So just put this up that doing alternative delivery is a lot of work. It's almost like you're doing another job very often on these long tender periods. So it's very painful when you lose these jobs. The need to innovate is highly important when doing this type of work. So just close with a few slides here, just showing you what's happened recently. For these major underground projects, all of them went alternative delivery. Every one of them. And then I put up this list. So this is what's coming. Most of these are going alternative delivery. And you can see these are big jobs. What's interesting is the Gateway program, that if you live in the Northeast, is a very prominent program. It's been around a long time. President Biden's been out there saying we're going to break ground. There's 4 major contracts on Gateway. 2 are going conventional delivery and 2 are going alternative delivery. Interesting. So to wrap up, owners are using everything, depending upon the job. I don't think there's one solution out there. There's clearly a shift, but conventional delivery is still used. And designers and contractors are adapting their approaches to do this. And if we had more time, maybe afterwards, I put up these questions to think about. Do you agree with the trends that are happening? Do you think it's right? Those of you that have used all these methods, do you like them? Do you have a preferred delivery method? And what do you see as the major issues facing us today? So I'm almost right on time, Tom. So I'll stop there and take a question or two. Thank you.
Excellent presentation. Good way to end the day talking about delivery methods. Okay, anybody have any questions or comments? The questions that we have up here might be good for our brain think tank tomorrow. Yeah, Tom?
Only if you buy me a drink, Tom.
Yeah, you put out the question, you know, does anybody have any preference on different methods? What are your thoughts? I would comment that each is probably appropriate in different situations, and it must be linked to the risk allocation and the risk sharing, and in some situations, depending on the risk of the project, one delivery form may be more appropriate, and in another situation, another one. I mean, would you agree? How do you think that breaks down?
So Tom asked if I have a preference. I do. When it's executed fairly, I would stay with what I'll call traditional design build. And the reason for that is what I've seen with progressive design build, the expectations are not aligning with reality. What's happening is the owner sometimes thinks that this is going to become a better process, and somehow this is the solution to all their problems. The solution to the problems is to execute design build properly, in my view, where you fairly share the risks and identify how you want to execute it. Okay? Doing things like risk ladders, having good ATC periods, having fair stipends. Those are all elements of doing it right. I did a progressive design build job that the owner had 0 stipend. It went on for a year because they claimed we weren't doing any real design. Our team spent collectively, designer and constructors, over $3 million on that project that we didn't do any design on with no stipend. And we lost.
All right, so we have heard about Detroit and D.C. water and Chicago, but we have an individual here in Boston, but he's not from Boston. He's from Goshen. It's a much smaller town than the 3 that we've had here. Just a question: have you used anything other than conventional design, bid, build? What about in your previous life with Elkhart? Everything was design, bid, build. So that's from a smaller community, 2 of them. So, huh? Okay, all right. Anybody else? Question, comment, experience, war story? Got one, Anna.
Anna, you have to tell me which one you like before you ask your question or comment.
Yeah. My feedback is I absolutely agree with you. Design build only makes sense if it's design build done right. There can be a ton of horror stories if you don't take into account the appropriate approach. A couple great resources if you are interested in considering collaborative delivery is there's an organization called Water Collaborative Delivery Association. They created a great handbook. I've got a copy of it back at my booth. And then also Design Build Institute of America, DBIA. They have a wastewater sector. I'm the co-chair of that. And those provide resources to help have it done right. Because I absolutely agree with you. If they don't have the appropriate team, the appropriate selection, the appropriate procurement process, it can absolutely end up in a horror show. But if done right, I think it can be a valuable tool. The same concept for design bid build. If it's not done right, it can end up in a horror show. So each one of these has a lot of potential to be good tools in the toolbox when appropriately implemented. But those are some good resources available for you. So if you have any interest in learning more, those good sources.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much. Good comment. Good recognition on some resources. Anybody else? Okay. One of my students. We got to see what his question is.
So we are working on a research project with the Indiana Department of Transportation, and they shared about last 15 years worth of change order data with us. All the change orders that they have processed in the last 15 years. And based on our observations, we found that the projects that had a delivery method of design build had almost no schedule delays, and the cost overruns were less than like 1%, 2% on those projects. So even the data shows that design build projects were better, at least for road and bridge projects in Indiana.
In India.
Yeah.
Okay. But, so, I question the data a little bit because I have several colleagues who work in India on design build, and that doesn't correspond with what they're telling me on big transit jobs.
Indiana.
Indiana. Okay, I thought you said India.
Oh no, Indiana.
Indiana. Okay.
Yeah. That's what we observed.
Okay.
That just shows the importance of good communication. Indiana versus India. All right, anything else? If not, we're going to adjourn for the day. It's been a good day. We've had some really good presentations and good interaction and networking, and it doesn't have to end here. We don't have anything really planned for tonight, so it's a good time to team up with some people and continue on with the networking. And we'll see you in the morning. Tomorrow morning is a very important day because we're going to kind of wind up a lot of things we've talked about today and figure out where we're going. So we have the think tank in the morning, so be thinking tonight about what you're going to bring up tomorrow in the think tank. And I can't wait to hear what John's got to bring up in the morning. So, all right, thank you very much.